Prices for popular sports and supercars are decreasing, but this hardly applies to the mid-engine Ferrari market. Out of all the different cars that I analyze on this channel, the mid-engine Ferrari market is clearly the strongest. Price trends for most models flattened, but the decrease rates are significantly lower than in comparable markets. In this video you'll get an update on the latest price developments, and at the end of the video I'll do my best to answer all of the questions that you asked. Let's start with a quick market overview. Over here we have the mid-engine US market of December. In total, there are 812 clean titles for sale, and when we look at the prices, we can see familiar patterns. With prices starting at $80,000, the 360 is the cheapest car in this graph, followed by the F355 and the F430. Manuals and rare examples are of course a lot more expensive. Prices stretch up to $500,000. Moving on to the slightly more modern models, we can see that they tend to go for approximately $250,000. That's a significant step up from the F430 and almost the same as what you need to pay for a 488. A 488 from 2016 is even cheaper than a 458 from 2015. F8s are again a big step up. Prices start at approximately $360,000 but can go up to $575,000 for a high-spec Spider. SF90s are in a league of their own, even though that this is the model for which prices are falling the quickest. And speaking about falling prices, that's what we can see in most car markets. Subscribers will know that prices increased a lot during the pandemic, but topped somewhere between the spring and summer of last year. Since then, they have been falling, with the result that many cars are now cheaper than 1 year ago. But as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this doesn't apply so much to the Ferrari market. Let's have a look at the price trends. And I by the way intend to cover them rather quickly because I will refer back to them at the end of the video when I will answer your questions. We start with the F355 and then work our way up to the SF90. Over here we have the price trend for the Spiders. Supply for other model variants is unfortunately too low. Supply for the Spiders is also low, with 12 to 22 cars, but sufficiently large to get a rough idea of the price trend. We can see that the price trend looks relatively strong. Compared to last year, prices are still up by 14.5% or roughly $14,000. The median price fluctuates a bit as supply is limited, but the confidence intervals reveal that prices have been stable since last summer. Now moving on to the 360 market, we can see that the year-over-year price increase is much smaller, but impressive nonetheless. Prices are up by 2.5% or $2,500. We can see again some price fluctuations during last year, but these are predominantly caused by changes in the market composition. I would not read too much into them. It are, however, especially long-term owners who are looking at a nice increase. Prices are up by 25% or $20,000 compared to September 2019. Also, the price trend in the automatic F430 market is relatively strong. We can see that prices decreased slightly since last summer, but are still at the same level as 1 year ago. The long-term price increase is similar to the one in the 360 market. Compared to February 2022, prices increased by 29% or $32,000. And with that it's time to have a look at the 458 market. But before we do so, if you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Now looking at this price trend, we can see that the top formation is slightly stronger than in the 360 and F430 market, but it's nothing to worry about. Compared to last year, prices are still up by 4.1% in the coupe market and 3% in the Spider market. And these are really great results if you compare it to, let's say, the Audi R8 or 911 market. Again, long-term owners can be more than happy. Compared to April 2020, prices are up by 31% in the coupe market and by 35% in the Spider market. However, supply increased significantly in this market. Currently it's only 10% lower than in April 2020, and this could result in downward price pressure. Moving on to the 488, we can see the by now familiar trend. Compared to last year, prices are up by 2.1% in the coupe market and down by 0.9% in the Spider market. And the latter change is the first decrease that we've seen so far, but it's so small it could be the result of chance. the decrease isn't statistically confirmed. The long-term price trend looks still very strong. Compared to July 2020, coupes are up by 19% and spiders by 16%. Yet, just as in the 458 market, supply might become a significant risk. With 250 cars for sale, supply is approximately 10% higher than in July of 2020, and this contrasts to the 127 cars in June 2021. And this V-shaped pattern is what we can see in most of the markets. So while the supply trend is in line with the rest of the market, the price trend isn't. Also, prices in the F8 market are strong. Compared to last year, coupes are up by 1.9% and spiders by 5.5%. Spiders increased slightly more during last summer and were driven significantly less. The median mileage for a spider has been stable at approximately 1000 miles, whereas it increased from 1500 to 3000 miles in the coupe market. And with that we arrive at the SF90. And this car is the major exception when it comes to mid-engine Ferraris. It even made it to the list of the fastest depreciating cars. Over here we can see that prices have been decreasing since its introduction. Compared to last year, they dropped by 17.9% or, and I hope that you're sitting down, $170,000. Now there are a few things that we need to take into account. The first data point is based on only 5 cars, so it might not give a correct indication of the market price. Yet, supply quickly grew and sits now at 82 cars. Second, when we get at this level in the market, the difference between the listing and selling price might be of importance for the trend. It's difficult to get a sense of selling prices, as there are not so many people buying an SF90, let alone reaching out to me to share their buying experience. The ones who do reach out though, confirm this picture. Now that was a very quick review of the latest development in the Ferrari prices, so I think it's time that we do a little summary. 3 months ago I uploaded a video with the title "The Ferrari market is cracking." We saw that the big price surge was over and that price trends flattened. That's still the case, but the cracks didn't result in a full-blown avalanche. With the exception of the SF90, prices are strong. Decrease rates are much smaller than in other popular sports and supercar markets, but that doesn't mean that there are no risks. We briefly discussed that supply increased considerably for all models from the 458 onwards, so going forward, it's not unreasonable to expect some price decreases. One thing we didn't do is investigate detailed breakdowns, and the reason for this is that many of you asked for these breakdowns in your questions, so let's have a look at those questions. Most of you wanted to know the differences between the automatic and manuals, so let's start with the 360. Over here we have in orange the price trend for the manuals and in blue for the automatics. Manual 360 owners, don't worry. The price trend illustrates perfectly why it's difficult to get reliable price trends for markets with low supply. It looks like prices plummeted, but that's not the case. The price drop over here results from a change in market composition. The cars in September had a median mileage of 11,000 miles, whereas the current cars have a median mileage of 27,000 miles. If we look at the mileage to price relationships over time, we might get a better understanding of what happened. That's what we see over here. And note that the time is now indicated by the color. The most recent data is represented by the color purple, and this reveals that the market might have softened a bit compared to the market top of last summer. If we look for example at cars with 30,000 miles, we can see that the purple points tend to be lower or at the same level as the orange, green and red points. The same applies for low mileage cars. The purple dots are approximately at the same level as the blue ones, so the ones of last year. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty in this data, and a lot of it is driven by pure chance. But if we go with what we have over here, we can see that the market decreased slightly since last summer and is at approximately the same level as last year. So this means that it's a tad weaker than the market for the automatics. But to be fair, the price increase since 2019 was almost 2 times as large in the manual market. So what about the F430s? Well, much of the same applies over there. While supply is slightly larger in the F430 market, it's very difficult to get a reliable price trend. Yet, since March of last year, the median mileage didn't fluctuate so much, so this little S shape over here is fairly reliable. We can also see this from the confidence interval. So this means that compared to March, prices decreased by 0.6% in the manual market, and this is the same as the 0.8% in the automatic market. So prices seem to have moved in a similar fashion. Compared to February 2020 though, manuals increased more. They went up by 37.8%, while the automatics increased by 29%. So to sum things up, in the short term, manual and automatic prices moved approximately the same. In the long term though, manuals clearly increased more. And with that, it's time to move on to the questions about the special models, the Challenge Stradales, the Scuderias, the Speciales and the Pistas. But as you might have expected, the price trends for the first two are unreliable. We can see that the trend for the Scuderia is all over the place. Especially between the beginning of 2020 and 2022, the fluctuations are large. Supply decreased from 32 to 5 cars. Looking at the long-term trend and the confidence intervals, we can see that prices are significantly higher now than at the beginning of 2020. Also, looking at the most recent period, it appears to be so that the market softened a bit. The price trend for the Challenge Stradale is a bit more stable. We can see that the market bottom increased a bit, but that it's especially the market top that increased during last year. Let's move on. Over here we have the price trend for the 458 Speciale Coupe, and look what a run up they have had. Between April 2020 and March 2022, prices increased by 60%. That's an enormous increase and definitely one of the largest increases that I've seen on the channel. But just like the rest of the market, prices topped. They decreased by roughly 3 to 4% between March and September. In the last quarter of 2022 though, something special happened. The price trend turned up again. And this is one of the few trends that actually turned up at the end of last year. And this is categorically different to what is happening in the 458 market. In fact, I don't think I've seen this in any other market. A closer inspection of this increase shows that it's mainly the market top where prices increased. The bottom was fairly stable. This increase though is not fully statistically confirmed. So we need to wait till the next market update to see if prices really increased. The most recent developments in the 488 Pista market though are aligned with the 488 market. Over here we have those two price trends, and we can see that prices decreased by 3 to 3.5% in both markets. And this is representative for most time periods, with exception of the first one. Between 2021 and 2022, prices surged in the 488 market. So this means that compared to June 2021, prices are up by 20% in the Pista market and by 6% in the base market. Now going back to the questions, there was someone who asked about the differences between the US and European markets. I mentioned a while ago that I'm aiming to include the UK and German market during this year. So up until then, I cannot comment on the differences. As of now, it looks like the UK market will come in first and then the German one. Stay tuned for that. And with that, it's time to wrap up and conclude. Basically, the mid-engine Ferrari market can only be summed up in one way. It's relatively strong. Prices for older models continue to float or remain flat, while the decrease rates for younger models are much lower than in the rest of the market. Therefore, it belongs among the top markets that I'm currently tracking. Is it a coincidence that also some V12 Ferraris belong to that list? Or is it just some of this Ferrari magic that is keeping prices high? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And with that, we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you will find market analysis for a large variety of cars. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.